Good morning, Facebook. Good morning. Vulnerability. I've just made myself laugh so much, when you have one of those living moments of what you're actually talking about. I'm just been sitting in the gym this morning, or is it afternoon? This morning, anyway. And I had this big download of all the stuff that I talk about from a vulnerability perspective. I was listening to an amazing podcast this morning, Nourish Life One, with Brian and Carrie. Absolutely phenomenal. Go check it out. Awesome listen, and an awesome way to start the morning. And that kind of ramping up into that really I'm going to get shit done mindset, which is even cool on a Sunday. But I was sitting there and it was like one of the little topics that was covered was vulnerability. And I know it is such a key word for so many of us now. It's one of the most popular TED Talks. We all know, if you've spent more than 2 seconds in the world of self-development, self-improvement, we can all actually sit there and run through that mantra of vulnerability is not a weakness. We know it's not a weakness. It takes incredible bravery, or any courage takes vulnerability. And we all sit there, but there's still, and even for me now, and having vulnerability is actually even to the point where this was one of my core values for the business and myself, is actually showing up and being vulnerable and being open. And it feels horrible. And it's like one of those ones of, where the hell do you actually start? We know it's important. We know on that conscious level, that surface level, that understanding that this is part of life and really important to get into where we want to be, having the relationships that we want, having the relationship with ourselves, whether that's even in business, in life, in every other part that we want to improve. We've got to be vulnerable and we've got to show up as we are, which immediately, even now, for me, we get that feeling of, what the hell do I do? Where do I start with this? And as I was actually going through it myself and listening to the podcast this morning, I was like, oh shit, of course. It's the same as everything else that we do. It's the same as anything, whether it's your sex life, love life, fitness, health, anything like that. It's got to start with you. And what I mean by this is actually getting really vulnerable with yourself. Because in my experience, in a lot of people's experience that I speak to, the girls that I work with, the men that I work with, the hundreds of people I've worked directly with, and the thousands of people that I've spoken to, the one thing that we are like the most scared of is the inner critic, the voice in our heads. And it's the one part of us that we spend the most amount of time avoiding. So when we talk about, and I talk about this a lot, like numbing, avoiding things, we're actually, and we've all got these patterns. If you're a fan of Gabbo Mate, I love his talks on addictive behaviours and what we're actually doing, and the way we actually use these behaviours to avoid ourselves, because that's all we're doing. We're not avoiding necessarily other people. We're not avoiding doing things because they're actually no good for us or the good behaviours. But when I'm talking about addictive behaviours, I'm not just talking about like heroin and crack and all the stuff that our mind goes to when we think of an addict. I'm talking about the day-to-day stuff, the overtraining in the gym, the Netflix, the avoiding. So if I talk from my side of things, it's going to be Netflix, it's going to be wine, it's going to be head in the cereal cupboard, it might be, as I said, training too much, it might be working too hard, and it's all these things that we do because what we're trying to do is avoid that voice in our heads, because we are our own worst critic by far. We all know that voice can actually tear us apart in seconds. So this is where I'm inviting people who are starting to realise and wake up to the idea that vulnerability is really, really important and is something that they want to delve into, especially if you want to connect deeply to other human beings. You've got to connect deeply to yourself. And that isn't just the sanitized, beautiful, high vibe version that we all find it really easy to love ourselves. We're in that mode where we're working really hard, or we're feeling really productive, or we're in the gym, or we're meditating, and we're all doing all the stuff that we know, the self-love checklist and all this type of thing. I'm talking about connecting and really getting used to the idea of the person, that part of us that we don't really like and we try and avoid, the one that critic just destroys on a regular basis. Because for us to be vulnerable, we've got to feel safe. And if we're not feeling safe within ourselves, it is so difficult to feel safe within any other environment. It doesn't matter where we are. So the biggest work that any of us can do, and whether that's to do with your relationships, and this is why I've gone live on my main page as opposed to in the group, it's that understanding that this feeling of being okay to show up as who we are in this moment authentically. I mean, authentic is such an amazing word, but again, with vulnerability, it's one of those ones that it can get diluted, and it can get used as almost a bit of a, oh yeah, it's very popular. It's like self-worth and self-development and all these things that we're used to hearing about being really important. But we don't ever actually it's quite easy not to actually dive into them. So actually understanding of how to create a safe space within our own head is the first point of being vulnerable. Or actually, it's the feeling safe in our own head takes the level of vulnerability that I'm inviting people today to have a think about and start exploring. And the way we get to do this is we get to face that inner critic. We actually get to listen to them. We get to spend some time there, and it is uncomfortable. It is painful. It can be emotional at times, especially when it's new and it's something that you haven't done before. But the more time that we do, and the more time that we spend there, and the more familiar we are that this is just a voice in our heads, that this is just a repetition of stories and experiences that we've been having throughout our entire lives. As soon as we start facing that, and actually being able to reframe and actually question applied logic and go, is this actually real? Is this who I want to be? Is this the life that I want to live? This is where any sort of change comes from. And when we live in a world where we're consistently just talked about, positive thinking, affirmations, all of this, got to be positive all the time. But until we get really vulnerable with ourselves and actually really reflect into the crap that is going on in there, we don't actually get to make any changes. You can't move to where you want to be without really understanding where you are right now in this present moment. So that is my first invitation. And I wrote some others down because it is something that I've been on a massive journey with myself. The next stage for me of actually understanding what vulnerability is, and instead of just going, oh my God, it's going to hurt, it's going to be, I had this perception it was just me going to be vomiting truths and this horrific person that I am and all these things that the critic was kicking off at, and actually having to share everything with the world. I mean, talking about sex and talking about my sexuality and my version of things and the journey that I've been on has been an incredible part of the vulnerability journey for me. But actually, when I took a step back and really reframed in my mind what it was, and actually just taking it out and going, do you know what? All it is taking aligned action. And by aligned action, I mean the stuff that is authentic and aligned to who I actually am. Not people pleasing, not what I think people want to hear, not what I think my mum and dad would want me to say, what I'm scared of my family finding out, or what if someone that I used to work with 15 years ago thought of me. Actually showing up, taking aligned action without knowing what the outcome's going to be. That's all it is. And it is so, it seems oversimplistic, but actually taking that step back and going, when we spend so much time and energy trying to understand what the outcome is going to be, when we never know what the outcome can possibly be, there's a million different options. This is where anxiety and worry comes from, is trying to predict what other people are going to say, what's going to happen, all this stuff here. it's actually just understanding that we don't know what the outcome's going to be, and being okay with that. And that only comes from practice and daily practice, and just sitting there going, do you know what? I'm going to just show up as me in this moment. And then the final one, which is a really, really, maybe not the starting point for vulnerability, but an absolutely amazing question that I learned from my mentors, of actually understanding who that worst version of you is. Actually really digging deep inside yourself and going, hang on, this is the person I don't want anyone to see. This is the person that when people find out, they're gonna hate me, they're gonna disown me, they're never gonna listen to me, my friends, my family, the people I love the most, my business is gonna fail. We all have these stories, or normally one particular story that is the validation and the proof that we're not a good person and we're not good enough. So actually starting to peel back that layer and peel back this understanding of what this worst version of us is, and actually then applying logic to it is phenomenally powerful, and so important for us to understand that voice, that inner critic, that person inside us that goes, you're not good enough, it's not going to work, you're not going to be okay if you do this, they're all going to hate you, whatever. Everyone's got their own flavour version of that voice. But actually taking a step back and going, well, what is that one thing? And the question that I use is, what is the one thing that I wouldn't want appearing on tomorrow's newspapers, on the front page of the Mail or the Independent or whatever it is, or on Reddit or Facebook or whatever newspaper that we access these days? It's like, well, what is that story? What is that one story that we wouldn't want anyone else to find? Now, I am not saying you have to post it on your Facebook or you have to talk about it. You don't have to then go live. You don't have to tell the world. This goes back to point one, where it's like where we feel safe. But actually finding a place within yourself to start off with, writing it down in a journal if that feels good to you, or just being able to speak it out loud to yourself, is just that first understanding that this is just a story that we're telling ourselves. This does not make you an unlovable person. This does not mean that you're never going to find the relationship that you dreams. It does not mean that all men are going to treat you like shit or drop you when they've had sex with you. All of this stuff that validates the crap within our heads, that critic within our heads. The next stage for that is always then just sharing it with a person that you feel safe with, and whether that's a coach, whether that's a mentor, whether who that is in your life can be someone that you know, trust, and you feel safe with. And these are the practices of vulnerability that really make such a difference. And this is how we start practicing it with ourselves, because at the end of the day, it's not something that ever goes away and gets it never gets to a point where if it feels easy, it's not being vulnerable. That's a start. But when we know and when we learn that no matter how vulnerable we get in a safe place, that we don't actually die, the more that we practice it, the more that we share our stories, the more that we even just admit them to ourselves and actually face them ourselves and apply that logic, so we actually understand that these are just scripts that are literally controlling our entire lives. The more and more you practice that, the easier it becomes. It still feels weird, it still feels uncomfortable, but it gets easier to actually practice. So if that has resonated with you, I would love to know. If you've got any questions, drop me a comment below. But if this is part of your life that vulnerability and stories are such an intrinsic part to understanding any sort of personal development, that is why it's such a huge part of the new program that I've got coming out, which is starting on the 7th of June. It's called I'm Woman. So I'm Woman. Oh my God, I've got the name wrong. I'm going to get shot by marketing. It's I Am Pleasure Ed 2019. It is the ultimate class for women. It is a 12-week program. It is how to really dive into one, vulnerability, of course, but actually that core level confidence, incredible sex, and how to actually create these deep, meaningful connections that really do. It really is what we are craving as human beings at the moment. And doing all the work, and the 4 areas that we cover in that are absolutely incredible. It's education about how your body works. It's embodiment, actually building up that connection to yourself. It is storytelling. It is this vulnerability part. Until we rewrite these stories and these limiting beliefs, we cannot make lasting changes. This is where so many times that we go on programs and we go and do classes and we do workshops and we do all this sort of work, and then it feels amazing. You know, you might go to a big event where you're screaming, shouting, dancing around, and it feels incredible while you're there. But as soon as you get home and real life kicks in a matter of hours, days, weeks, everything just returns to normal. It's because we're not addressing these stories, these limiting the beliefs, this script that we run on ourselves on a daily basis. And then the next part from that, which brings everything together, is the confidence. It's that core level confidence, that connection to self, that self-acceptance, self-worth, that every part of confidence comes from. Every part of confidence comes from. So if that resonates, if you want to know more, just drop me a private message or a comment below and I'll reach out to you. We get started on the 7th of June. I'm already taking some places for applications this week. So, and I say there's a maximum of 6 people, 6 women. It is going to be a incredibly exciting, very intimate, very hands-on, literally, not mine, yours, experience that teaches you not how I have an amazing life or how I have incredible sex or how I do things in the bedroom or all this type of stuff. It's teaching yourself what works for you. So yeah, I would love to know if that resonates, and yeah, I will speak to you all soon. Take care.